With Buckeye football kicking off in 7 days, I really want to bring forth to the table a question that I kind of have and I'm kind of undetermined on. Ohio State's most important game. What do you think their most important game is? Tell me in the comments below what you think Ohio State's most important game is. Because I think there are 5 games that stick out, and there's reasons for each of them to be the most important. And first and foremost, I'm just going to jump right into their schedule and talk about this, and then afterward, just kind of reiterate my prediction for Ohio State's schedule in case you're new here. So, Minnesota, I think, is an important game. It's the kickoff. It's the opener. It's going to be at a blackout game in Minneapolis. Minnesota returns a lot of guys, Muhammad Ibrahim, Tanner Morgan, and they do return a lot of their offensive line, and they return a great deal of their defense. Now, their defense and offensive line were not great last year by any stretch of the imagination, but by returning all of them and my confidence in PJ Fleck, I do believe that they will greatly improve. Rashad Bateman is the main guy who leaves Minnesota, but Chris Autman-Bell is poised to at least somewhat fill his shoes in a certain regard. The reason it might not be so important, despite the fact that I have Minnesota being a really good football team and all that, they don't really have the talent to compete with Ohio State if Ohio State doesn't make a certain amount of mistakes or if they don't have an inferior game plan. This could easily be a blowout and just a blip in the schedule altogether. I don't think that'll be the case, but Minnesota is, in my opinion, a good football team. It could very easily not be that way, especially against Ohio State. And then you have Oregon, and Oregon it kind of is on the fringe of critical and not critical, and I mean that because it's a non-conference game. You lose this game, it's going to sting. It's going to really sting because it's a home game. It's against a team that I think is overrated, and I think a good amount of people also think are overrated in a certain sense. But at the same time, if you lose this game still, it's a non-conference game. You're still easily in the running to win the Big Ten championship. And I say that because no one on your schedule, by the media's view, by my view, there's a good amount of teams who have the potential to be better than Oregon. And I'd say there's one that definitely will be, in my opinion. But by media perception and opinion, there's not really many teams on your regular season schedule, if any, that will come even close to Oregon or be better than them. You lose to Oregon, you're still in the running to beat everyone else in your regular season schedule and still in the running to win the Big Ten championship game. Another reason it is important is because it'll be really the second test after Minnesota. By the media viewpoint, Oregon will be a harder test than Minnesota. CJ Stroud does well against Minnesota, will come up against Thibodeau and the Oregon Ducks and see how you do, see how you handle the pressure. Granted, you'll have a bunch of fans supporting you, but it's going to be a harder test by media view. If you win this game, you'll get the media and you'll get just really everyone's stamp of complete playoff approval if you win this game. Tulsa, Akron, Rutgers, and Maryland, who come after, I don't view as important games. But one reason Oregon couldn't be important before I move on to Indiana is it's a non-conference game. You lose, oh well. You can still win the Big Ten championship game and have an undefeated conference record. And that's kind of why it's on the fringe of critical and not so critical. Indiana is up next, and Indiana is the team that I was mentioning when I said, in my opinion, will be better than Oregon. I have Indiana being a 10-2 team, losing to Iowa and Ohio State. I have Iowa as a top 15 team. Ohio State is a top 4 team. So Indiana will beat everyone else on their schedule, including Cincinnati. They're going to be a really good football team with Ty Fryfogle, Michael Penix Jr., and with their solid defense. It's an important game because if Indiana is as good as I think they will and they somehow beat Ohio State, then Indiana's winning the Big Ten East. They just are. If Indiana beats Ohio State, they're winning the Big Ten East, or they're going to be like Ole Miss under Hugh Freeze, with a better coach than Hugh Freeze, obviously. They're going to be like Hugh Freeze in 14 and 15, beating Alabama and then losing a conference game more than Ohio State, one at least, so then they're out of the championship game race. Indiana will still be pretty good. They're going to be hungry for this win if they get it, and that is because last year they almost came back and tied Ohio State, and that would have forced overtime. And with all the momentum behind Indiana, I think they would have won that game if they somehow got Ohio State to overtime. Michael Penix threw for 400 yards that game, and Ty Freifogel made Shaun Wade look like he shouldn't have been drafted that game. Granted, Shaun Wade had to switch positions. But Indiana, you could say, is the most critical game, and I really can't see this game unless Indiana starts off poorly and has a few losses heading in as to why this couldn't be a critical game. Tom Allen's certainly a coach on the rise. He currently has, I think he's projected to have one of Indiana's best recruiting classes ever, if not its best ever. So Indiana's certainly a team to look forward to in the future. And next we have Penn State. And Penn State, I'm not going to talk about them much here. It's only important because Penn State has played Ohio State the closest, and Penn State, along with Michigan, does have the pieces on offense to stay in rhythm for enough quarters to where if their defense is also solid, they could maybe beat Ohio State by a few points. Not saying it's going to happen. Probability of that happening is far closer to 0 than it is 50% even. But Penn State could catch Ohio State napping. Ohio State prepares a lot better for Michigan than it does for Penn State, and Penn State has played Ohio State much harder and tougher than Michigan has, for certain. And Penn State, with Mike Yurcich as its OC, and with Jahan Dotson as its really chief wide receiver here, as I've already mentioned, they certainly have the talent on offense to pace itself with Ohio State for a few quarters. And not only that, their defenses are normally solid. Penn State only lost by a combined 13 points from 2017 to 19 when they lost 3 games. That right there is just absolutely insane. Just losing a game by just over 4 points on average to one of the best teams in the country. They beat them in 16. Their worst loss was in 2020, just this last year, and it wasn't even that huge of a blowout. Granted, Ohio State tuned itself down a little bit by the end. Penn State could easily not be important, though, because kind of like Michigan, they could just lose another time in a row. Or Penn State really could, even if they do beat Ohio State, the only reason these games aren't important is if these teams don't perform well. I list these games as important because I think all of these teams will either do well or they have a chance to catch Ohio State napping. Penn State is more of the catch napping kind of game, where the previous 3 I mentioned is because these teams I think are going to be good. And Michigan is similar to Penn State. Michigan won't be good enough. Same with Penn State. And they don't have enough, I don't know, what do you call it? Like PJ Fleck, Mario Cristobal, Tom Allen, there's just something about them to where like they can lead their teams to just overcome many things. And I don't think Franklin and Harbaugh have that X factor, in my opinion. But what Harbaugh and Franklin can do, what Franklin I think did in 16, is they caught the other team napping. It's exactly what they did. Ohio State at the end of that season was the better team than Penn State. Penn State still beat them because Penn State and Franklin, despite me not having the best respect for him, I have to give him props for catching Urban Meyer napping and beating him off of a blocked field goal. Michigan is in that similar boat with Penn State. Ohio State will prepare itself far more for Michigan than anyone else on their schedule. Even more than Minnesota, even more than Oregon. Even if Someone from the future told Ryan Day that Michigan would go 3-9 and told them that he would certainly beat Michigan. He would still prepare more for Michigan, knowing no matter what he would beat them than anyone else on their schedule. It's just how Ohio State functions. They obsess about Michigan and obsess about beating them in an extremely admirable way, a way that I wish Michigan would adopt in the same regard to Ohio State. Michigan will only beat Ohio State if Ohio State gets so focused on Michigan and wants revenge so badly from last year that they mess up in trying to humiliate Michigan. You know, trying to hang 100 on a team could result in some errors. It's happened before. You try to humiliate a team, and it ends up that team ends up humiliating you. Again, not saying that's going to happen. Very low chance that it does. And I say very low chance because Michigan under Harbaugh has never beaten Ohio State. And Michigan, again, doesn't necessarily have the offensive talent. I'd say they'd have less offensive talent than Penn State, Indiana, less than Minnesota, at least proven-wise. Less proven talent than anyone of the key games I mentioned, and probably by star rating, less than Penn State and less than Oregon. So that's why Michigan's defense might be the best out of all of these teams, besides maybe Oregon, who under Mario Cristobal always have had solid defenses. But as I've mentioned before, you have to have the offense when it comes to beating Ohio State, and winning in general is more important than the defense. And now that I've discussed all of these games, let's just jump right into their schedule briefly before I end and talk about my record prediction. Every game except Minnesota will be a win. I have Minnesota being an upset game because I think Minnesota's underrated. I think PJ Fleck will get another signature upset win here that'll put him back on the map. But after this, Ohio State will likely blow out Oregon, beat Tulsa, Akron, Rutgers, and Maryland. They'll feel through Indiana in kind of a slow boxing match, but come out on top. That Penn State game will look like the 2013 Penn State game. It'll be an absolute bludgeoning. At Nebraska will be a win. Purdue and Michigan State will be blowout wins. Michigan State could be a little closer than anticipated, though. And at Michigan it won't be humiliating in the same way as 19 and 18 for Michigan. The score will be closer because Harbaugh will give his all in all, but it will be humiliating to Michigan in the sense that his all in all isn't enough. Michigan will lose, knowing it tried nearly its hardest, and they still lost. Ohio State will finish 11-1 regular season, go to the championship game, and match up with the Wisconsin Badgers, where they will win the Big Ten championship game. And starting from 2017, blaring through 18, 19, and 20, Ohio State will win its 5th straight Big Ten championship. Thank you all for watching. If you liked this video, remember to like, subscribe, hit that notification bell, and comment your thoughts down below. Again, what's Ohio State's most important and critical game and/or heading into 2021, heading into this season? What game strikes you the most as the most pivotal, most important game? What game could change Ohio State's season completely around in a good way or a bad way? Let me know in the comments below. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you around.